what's the definition of a modern data stack is really a good question to ask. And I've got a view on it. A lot of people on LinkedIn have a big view on it when I put something on there as well. But yeah, in fact, I've got a view, but I'm going to ask Lauren first.
What is the modern data stack?
Yeah.
The modern data stack is dead. And the modern data stack is based around the idea of a cloud warehouse, like we're at Snowflake. It could be Snowflake, could be BigQuery, could be a couple other things.
Could be an inferior thing like Redshift, but possibly.
Yeah. But it's Snowflake since we're at Snowflake. But the modern data stack is cloud data warehouse and a set of vendor tools that sit around it. So that's everything for your ETL, reverse ETL, however you want to do the T piece.
We'll pass on that for a bit. We'll come back to that a bit.
And yeah, there's too many vendors. There's too much human middleware involved.
Well, I think that I'd like to add, in my view at least, that one of the characteristics, even the old data stack was for giving value to data consumers. But one of the characteristics, due to the abilities with cloud data warehouses and cloud data access, is to have a lot of people accessing data in many different ways, and the data in the modern data stack, or whatever it is we want to call it, right? It's just a name. The MDS.
Yeah.
So the data also keeps changing, and thus the challenges are different than the quote unquote old legacy data stack, whatever you want to call it. And
because you got two Bens, I forgot you this earlier. Ben, you do a lot of videos on the modern data. I've seen one or two, but you might have heard of the Seattle data guy that posted a great content. But yeah, so you've got some, you've got what you think are the minimal component. And you can just go and get your YouTube video up and tell you. But do you want to talk about what you think is that combination?
Yeah, I mean, like I guess for me, it's mostly like the companies I've worked with. It's usually like at the very least like ingestion, storage, some sort of BI layer for providing, some way of giving people access to that data, and then like hopefully some form of like quality control to some extent. But that always tell people like that always comes in later, regardless of how much you try to bring in sooner. People just like add it in later.
It's very hard to get a data quality project or get the budget for it until you actually prove it's better.
Until something actually blows up.
Yeah, exactly. Same with security as well.
Exactly. Same with security. Same with like it's the same thing with cybersecurity. Same thing with anything. Yeah. It's like
you're also wishing for that breach. You say, look, I told you so. All that time I've been saying, put that stuff in.
Then all the budget's open.
Yeah. Then the budget's gone, isn't it? And you don't get bonus out yet. It's a balance, isn't it? It's not which way to go.
Yeah, exactly. When the CEO or the CFO is the one reaching out and being like, hey, this number seems off or was off today. Then suddenly there's budget. But I like what you brought up earlier, how like some people it's like really the data, like the modern data stack for one person is like, not to say a spreadsheet, but like it could be, it's like, look, there's half a person doing this and there's 3 people on this whole company. And then like, for someone else, it's like they're doing machine learning, they're doing like
or they've got 25 DBT developers or something.
Or that, or you've got, an army of DBT developers. Yeah. But again, like it's like, it just depends on like a lot of companies are at different stages, like whether it's size, whether it's like the focus of data, right? Like you work at a large tech company, the focus of data is huge, and then if it's just your Pepsi, yes, you can say you're focusing on data, but that's not your focus. Yeah, it's never going. It's not your business.
You touched on something. It's that maturity of a company and where they are on that journey and what's actually right for them. So. They don't go and have to have a whole machine learning capability or the rest of it. If they don't even bother getting the plumbing or actually the data in a prep. So, I think it's what's right for one and knowing where you're on that journey and the right stepping stones to get to the next level. Maybe there's an assessment framework you can get possibly that would be able to see where you're on that journey. So, pardon the plug. But, I think Itamar, you're talking about that CDC, that ETL orchestration world. I mean, I'm not going to preload a question because this is not prepared. We did not have. We haven't. Honestly, we haven't. But we'll see how it goes. So how do you see that world changing? I mean, we've had software as a services for Snowflake and things for a while, but where do you think the new era is?
Since I really like history, and especially when it comes to revolution, It's me, I guess. No. Okay. I think that let's go back like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you started to see the revolution in the front-end tools, like from
Cognos.
great tools like all business objects. I was the champion of business objects and then you see that the market needs to require more like there is a requirement and demand from the business for more self-service tools in the front end. So then you saw like ThoughtSpot, tools like Tableau, Looker, sorry about that one, but...
Do you want to talk more about ThoughtSpot? What do you think about ETL tools, Paul?
I love all your favorite. No, so I'm saying that this revolution already happened. Like now it's the rollout, more and more deep dive in the enterprises, and I think the next revolution with the rise of cloud, we saw mainly Snowflake, we saw BigQuery, those SaaS platforms. Yeah, Snowflake. We saw that they brought something pretty new. I will ask you that if there is a chance that an independent player will take the majority of this market, and it's not Microsoft, it's not Teradata, or not Oracle. You think that you're in illusion, let's say. So I think that because the demand for this one, you saw that Snowflake came in and basically did a great job with an amazing product. I must say, I must agree. And I think that now is the time. This year is the time of the third revolution, which is the part that we always like to forget, the pipelines, who wants to do pipelines? Like, pipelines, ETL,
Lots of data engineers do, because they get paid big money now, so
So what I think is that, I will call it modern data stack or not, it's mainly the time that more citizens of the data want to work with the data. So you must bring something that will speak to more audience. It can be the analysts that want to have self-service no-code APIs. It can be the data engineers that want to write Python, but not necessarily
heroes of the whole data engineers.
Not necessarily the guy that wants to build Python and to run machine learning that on the public library that out there, and he doesn't need to build now a full Spark solution.
Well, it'd be good if you just check a box or something and it goes and runs it for you. That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It's what?
If you just check a box, you go and run that Python code as part of your pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. So it's mixed. It's mixed of high code, low code, no code. Okay, and I think that this is what the demand that we see in the industry now. In particular, the CDC is really the engine to help companies like Cloud Account that now moving to cloud. Most of the players now working more with digital native companies, but now you see more and more enterprise organizations. Some of them here, I won't mention names, but they need to migrate data from Teradata, Oracle, the on-prem into the Snowflake, and they want to do it in the most efficient way, in the fastest time, and in the most secured way. So I think that overall, what we are trying to do is to make a revolution in this space and combine the backbone, not necessarily that you need to have 5 tools with 5-time chance to have a broken pipelines or to have security breaches between APIs. You're sending the credentials of Snowflake. The guy here will tell you that it's the most secured credentials in the organization.
Especially with Satori on top as well. It's that's locked down massively. So I mean, there's two things. There's two things you came up there with was like the big players before, where it was like, and linked to what you were saying, Lauren, about it's fragmented with many different vendors providing many different capabilities. But it was just the big four. We had all these things of the lineage because it was there. Now lineage is being reinvented as like the new calling. Well, I'm going to use IBM Data Stage or like Informatica. They've had it for like 25 years. I remember, unfortunately. So you've always had it, and I think the other one is data modeling. So this is like, I'm pretty nerdy, and that's my favourite topic is talking about surrogate keys and hash keys, and data modeling techniques, and data vault being one of my real fun topics. I'm not that sad, but we'll see later. But data mesh obviously is a new thing, and I know Jay, you've got some views, and we haven't even swapped to see if we're aligned yet, so it could get a bit hairy, couldn't it?
Yes, exactly. So literally at the end of the day, right, we talked about value, right? But value comes down to a couple of different areas. There's time to value, right? How long does it take to process all your data to actually generate value? Then on top of that, when you look at the data, how trustworthy is it?
Yep.
Because the value you get is depending on how trustworthy it is. So when you start looking at data points, there's certain metrics that you need to look at. So freshness, timeliness, you've got some SLOs that need to be prepared for certain types of stakeholders. So what ends up happening is that a lot of the data mesh approach comes down to scale, right? We start federating, and there's like 4 key principles of data mesh, right? And I take it, I don't know if everyone's aware, but there's 4 major principles, and one of them is data as a product, right? So what does it mean as a data as a product, right? You're building pipelines based on domains, right, which is specific people, which is federated. So you no longer start with a centralized hub, people that work with data and bring it in. There's no contention of bringing in data in, which is where most organizations fail today, because they say, I want this data today. They speak to a centralized team, and they go, yeah, we've got other priorities, right? You won't get this data for 3 to 6 months.
So do you think they go bypass it and go straight to the raw stuff? Or
Well, to be fair, most companies go down 2 different avenues. They either go down a shadow IT route themselves, right? Because they find contention with IT. And that's one way of looking at it. Or, back to your point, Chris, right? They just start looking at data directly from sources, which is, in its grander scheme of things, they might...
the worst of the 2.
Exactly.
And you prefer to maybe go with that approach.
But if you think about the ecosystem, right, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be in play when you start building a modern data stack in this scenario.
Marmite does.
Exactly. So, for example, right, when you're looking at your pipelines, you have to monitor them, right? Yep. You have to look at what's going on.
Observability. That's the new word, isn't it?
That's the capability, exactly. So the observability matrix, right, looks at how your data's work, how many times it's refreshed, when was the last time it's refreshed, right? What are these key metrics that need to be applied to your data?
Yeah, because what's good now may not be good tomorrow.
Exactly.
Data degradation. You know, what was nulls? You only got a few of them. Now you get every row null. You made some analysis on it. It's wrong.
But the thing is, that's a very good point, right? At the end of the day, your pipelines could be working absolutely fine. There's no errors in your pipelines because they're just brought in. But you just realize every one of your records got updated. Is that something you expected? No. Well, depending on what your use case is. But it's not always true. So you need to put these metrics in from an observability point of view to say what's their expected behavior. And there's a lot of good stuff with observability today, such as machine learning.
Talk about observability. It's like getting a view of the data you've got in there. Paul, how are you seeing like metadata that's being collected, being used to provide insight? And this is slightly loaded, this one.
I can't get
well, it's, I think the whole point for all of this is that there's a complicated route through, and then people still need to access data, right? So it doesn't matter what data you've got going in, but it's how do you make that easily accessible to everybody in the business. I think we're all becoming more demanding in our requirements for data, even the business users, in our personal lives as well. So you are becoming more demanding, Chris. Yeah, that's it. And the point there is that people don't want to wait. They want to be able to access data. They want to be able to just ask a question and get on with it. And that's where I think we're seeing, obviously we're the final point in the Marmite stack.
Magic happens, as I said.
Well, maybe. I think the magic happens all the way through, but it's allowing the business. But it's allowing people to really genuinely self-serve. And ask questions, get on with what they want to do, rather than waiting for a response, going back to a centralised team, building another report, asking another question, building another report.
So it's basically the life cycle, isn't it, of how quickly you can get to that. And people are going to bypass or take the shortcut. We're all human, we'll take what the easiest route is sometimes, especially if we're told we can't actually do it. So being able to accelerate getting data in via the pipeline, accelerating data into an app or something that provides that, taking away that the speed to actually get the data to them, but then after that, the speed to get their answers, because they ask one question, they get an answer, but that answer generates another question. And it goes round and round.
Yeah, no, people want to discover, right? People want to be curious and they want to discover information and answers. So you need to allow them to do that as quickly as easy as possible. Otherwise, you've got another bottleneck.
I think we see that as well. We see that our organizations want to shorten the time, like the time to value from data. We see that from a different angle. We see that they don't want to, for example, wait for security policies to be placed. They want to streamline that access. They want to limit the amount of data engineering work that needs to be done to enable people to access data, not only to get the answers, as in ask the questions, get the data, but also according to the role, according to the security policies of the organization. Like having a very simple security policy, like, well, you can pick your favorite, like I want people from Europe to only access data of European customers, or I want only accounting to be able to see financial data. The amount of preparation that needs to be done in many cases is huge, because you can't just say, okay, that's, you need to define what's financial data, where is it located, and that's a big problem, and that's something that we see and we're obviously trying to solve.
You think that's slowing down getting that business value? So because projects are being slowed down, and then what people are doing is probably doing a spreadsheet, sending it across, and then bypassing it, and you still got the security issue.
Definitely, and security must be the simplest way to pass through. Otherwise, people, like you said, bypass, and like you said, then you get to two ways. When it's like a process to get data that is painful for the organization, either someone gives up and you start giving away access in a too liberal way, or it takes more time and you lose the data game.
So I think we've been agreeing far too much at the moment, so
let's start fighting.
Right. So we're going to see is, like, obviously we're the independents.
Yeah. We
know what really is going on, because like we actually live the dream on the client side. But you've got loads of clients over here. You've both got loads of clients in different industries. Are you hearing? Is this a similar sort of thing you see in your clients, or problems you see in the organisation you work with?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and then I'll pass it over to Ben.
But we need a little bit of spice because it's been far.
Yeah, I mean, to Paul's point earlier, like, the battle over self-service versus not self-service is constant. What you see out there in the market is a number of data teams who want to take on more work in some cases. They want maybe something that should be pushed upstream. They want to do that in Snowflake, or another, not going to mention names, but another, alternative.
You can start
solution.
now, maybe. You can start now. It's okay.
Yeah, and it's this is the same thing that you run into in any organization, data or not. Like marketing does it with sales. Where are the lines drawn? And with self-service, like in a lot of cases, some businesses can't do self-service. They have not built the warehouse properly. They have not ingested things properly. And, it's really 3 layers, right? Like if you're talking about the Snowflake or, data warehouse world, how does stuff get in? What happens to it when it's in there? And then what do you do with it? BI, application, reverse ETL, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's 3 layers to it, and
I think BLT was the latest one, bilateral.
it's always a joke.
Yeah, but I don't like tomatoes, so I didn't want to call it that. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think the natural one was actually reverse ETL is LTE, but that didn't seem to go down very well. But yeah, we can rebrand it. We call it LTE now.
No, but just to wrap up, like, even the self-service piece, like, there's so many dependencies, analytics engineer, data engineer, analyst. Like, I think in the last couple of years, we've actually added more dependencies and complexity in all this.
But don't worry,
People,
you go to
everything.
your Scrum team, and don't worry, it's okay.
We're all agile.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to have that milestone you fit. So they hit that with extra roles. But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, the T-shaped or pie-shaped teams, or having multiple skilled people, or having tools that mean you don't have to have lots of specialist skills. work smarter, not harder.
See, and a final point on this is like, you either have tooling that replaces people, or people that replace tooling. And right now we're at a peak of both, and we're at a peak of both because in the U.S. at least, the interest rate's been zero the last 2 years, and companies have fat budgets and they haven't been scrutinized. And now we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to balance them out.
So this is that FinOps whole debate, and where FinOps fits into it as well, and accountability. I think accountability of the spend. I think I do my funny post on. There was one with, we're going to need a bigger boat. It was like, the Jaws thing. It's like, oh, I'm just going to stick a 6XL out because I can't be bothered to tune this really simple SQL because I'm that lazy. And it's just cost you $60,000 because you didn't shut it off in time, because you didn't set it up correctly. So, so there's people need to be more accountable for their spend. And also, like, how many developers you have doing something? Are they adding the value? Can they be doing something smarter and automated? So, I think the world of OpEx, where you had to do that, capital expenditure, where you had to go and plan it all out, you had to have that, and you had a waterfall Gantt chart, so you could see how bad you'd done against it. So it was easy there. That accountability went with the cloud pay-as-you-go. And I think that's the next thing being reinvented as well. Like, people being accountable for bad code, which if they watch a lot of your stuff, Ben, I'm sure they'd actually learn a lot more, wouldn't they, Ben?
I don't know. I don't know how to dovetail into that. I think the one thing that you brought up that's kind of interesting is only thinking about, again, going back to FANG experience. It's interesting seeing again, coming from FANG and seeing how people, when you own your own data centers, you own your own compute, you can be very careless, and there's almost zero repercussion, right? Because you have it.
You got to justify that spend that you did as well to get that big
where it's then you come out and when you're doing a lot of projects, you're seeing oh wow, people are just kind of spending, and I was talking about how it's oftentimes you kind of can come into a project and find 30%, where it's I just saved your bill a huge chunk of time, a huge amount, just because of a reconfiguration of a Snowflake table or some sort of re-architecture, and you just quickly find those. The way I was kind of thinking about it is it's interesting because I know past, when things were on-prem, you'd have to worry. It's okay, this column's 8 bytes.
Yep.
It's going to be, we're getting
where
this much.
Millennium Bug came from. I had to explain to my son. He goes, so what was that problem? I said, well, we were too cheap back then. We couldn't afford the storage to get the other 2 gigs. And shut up. No, it's true. Yeah. It's how time changes.
So that used to kind of be the way we worked, where it's okay, this is how much space this server has. This is how long we're going to have until we have to move physically into something else. And now I think it's not 8 bytes anymore. Now it's hey, we've this query is using whatever compute. How do we cut this down? Because
my best Friday nights was trying to get an explain pan down on an Oracle optimizer down from 3 or something like that. But they were the good old days, But it's no one has to now, because I can increase it. If you had to sweat the architecture you had there to get the best bang for your buck from it, you did code it. You did code it well. I think there's a little bit of laziness, which I know you're addressing with all your stuff and that, to help people learn the stuff to do it properly. And then obviously the advice that we give as consultants of doing that, making the data world better again, which I said I wouldn't say.
Yeah, it depends on whether they listen to it or not.
True, but they can't miss your post sometimes, thinking they know them, because they're definitely worth listening to in a reading sort of way. So we haven't actually had any questions, and we need to judge them at some point. But should we have I'm going to ask one myself. Is where do you see the Marmite data stack in the next couple of years? What's going to be reinvented next that people have forgotten that existed? Anyone? Anyway, I know what you're. In fact, now we know what yours is going to be. Actually,
that's a good question. You got the Lego.
Well, Dave, sorry, I nicked your question I gave you as the placement, but sorry, I couldn't do it because you would it's insider trading.
I think the choice we must provide, give the audience to decide what are the tools that they are working with, but we cannot over pushing every feature to make it in the category, and basically you don't know that there is another way to manage it. So I think that the way that I see it, it's all SaaS. We all see what's happening now with the stock, with the public market.
So what's going on?
It's not
You've done some
easy.
posts about this recently. I want to listen.
It's not easy. It's pushed our IPO in 2 years, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying
There's
that.
no rush. You need time to make perfection.
No, I'm just saying that the revolution is there. I think that everyone here agree that the revolution is there. The fact that you have some challenges now in the finance area, which I think is good. It's always in revolution. You know there is the FOMO that everyone wants to be there, and then you realize that maybe it's a good thing, it's an amazing revolution, but there is.
So what we need for these SaaS
Another
companies
factor.
is FinOps embedded in the SaaS
It's
process
SaaS,
to make them best
including
decisions.
FinOps,
So you can actually optimize
including
your
the
own
right
platform.
tools. I totally agree about the community, what they are doing with Python or what they are doing with DBT and those kind of tools, to embed them in the full solution. I think this is the way that I see it in the next couple of years. More
So
than
that's your
it's
one,
really
right?
hard.
So like,
Yeah.
who else has got a thing that's next to be reinvented? Because I guessed that one anyway. So what do you think is going to be reinvented next?
I think, so
what it is.
when you look at the modern data stack today, it's mainly driven by analytical processes, right? And one thing that I've always seen from a lot of my customers is the drive to get more near real time, right? So it's things like operational data stores and so on that's used. And literally, I mean, there's still a bit of a gap between the two, right, at the end of the day. But we're getting closer and closer to near real time. You saw the announcement.
Do you think data mesh is a vehicle or something that can actually help with that?
So it's not the full answer, but it does answer certain points, right? But at the end of the day, it's about how we treat our data and how we make decisions.
Yeah.
Because most of the decisions based on analytical data drives value over for a period of time which the data is available for, right? But if you can then start looking at personalization of customer experiences based on real time, like website usage and so on, then you start blurring the boundaries between analytics and operational to drive decisions.
So yeah, we were having a discussion last night. Why keep it in SAP for that long? Because SAP's very expensive, if you didn't know. So keeping it there in SAP, just keep it there for the time you need it, put it off to something cheaper. And it's that, again, the lost art of like information lifecycle management. You know, you put it on the storage tiers with the cheaper stuff. And again, back in the Oracle days, you did table spaces that went on to different things and cheaper storage. It was not the next thing reinvented. Here you go, information lifecycle management. Here you go, well, we found it.
But I think the one thing that I do want to say as well is when you the one thing we have to say, right, is that there's a lot of source data, which is always changing. But a lot of these models that we have, or which is like training, like machine learning models, or just general decision making, happens as a byproduct or not just one data set. It happens of a combination of multiple different data sets. And it's that goal of putting all the data sets together to drive one decision, that's where I see things moving forward.
And that decision, maybe right at that point in time, it always needs to be retrained and reviewed because other things change. Maybe data gets dirtier or even bad quality checked or the check, well, maybe have COVID. It has changed the whole data patterns.
Exactly, but the thing is,
Again, hopefully.
decisions are based on a back of a foundational data element, right? So therefore, there's certain assumptions you make with your data to drive the next best action. However, if those foundational elements change, you have to reprocess, you have to reevaluate where you make it. Even if you look at the current data stack, right? Things like data mesh is the prime example of where you have to rethink the foundations.
It challenged, you made decisions at a point in time based on the information you had, and the world changes, it moves on. So I've asked enough questions, and I've spoken far too much probably. So, open to the floor, questions. Oh, here we go. Latika, nice to meet you.
So we discussed a lot about observability, scaling. That is whether it's modern data stack or
Marmite data stack, or whatever you want to call it.
it's relevant, right? Even today, even before 10 years back, it's still relevant. Right? It's not something new. I think what is new, would you say, with the modern data stack is the big data, right?
Yeah.
We have veracity, velocity, and volume. And the
I think is that the number of tools that made it. Yeah.
That's what is different today. Would you all agree?
Oh, so the question is if we agree or not. These are. That's a tough one. Yes, I agree. But you know I agree anyway, so I can't answer.
Observability, maintainability, chargeback, whether it was done centrally or not, somebody had to pay, right? Whether it's in data center or something. But what is different is because of this huge scale, because companies are accumulating so much data.
So I'm going to take the fifth on this.
Yes,
because
but
I utility
not
all the
only,
time.
not only the accumulation of data, but also more people are accessing data. They have better tools.
It's global now.
Yeah.
As against siloed teams,
Yep.
you need to make data available globally across regions, across organizations. So that's what is different with modern data stack, I would say.
Okay, I agree. But other people.
It's actually really interesting, a term that you use, big data, right? In my world, there's no such thing as big data anymore. It's just data, and it's different volumes of data. And in most cases, some people think, oh, we're processing like terabytes of data, and so on.
It's not the volume also, it's veracity as well, right?
Exactly.
Right? You have different formats of data. Previously, it was all normalized, you have this data type. It's not anymore like that.
But true, but to be fair, like semi-structured data previously, you needed like things like pre-processing, you had to denormalize it, making sure it's flat, it's flattened from an ETL process, then load the data store.
You might not have stored that even in some cases.
Correct, but like, but with Snowflake, for example, right? You've got rid of like 5 steps already with the variant data type, right? So you land data automatically, and I think that's actually a really good stepping stone in terms of accelerating your data usage, because ultimately, the way I see, and back to your question regarding there's a lot of big data out there and how it gets used, is ultimately it's how quickly you can ingest, process, right, and then have business-driven decisions or value from it. That's really the most important thing. So even before, right, cost element, when you had a big data stack, you need to replicate that in 3 different places. That'll get a lot of, and there's the operational overhead of maintaining quite a big data stack solution. But all those level of effort and investments you used to make of that, like with something like Snowflake, you don't need to do those because it's already handled for you. So what do you concentrate on? The value side. That's really key. And back to the point, the amount of data that you process, right, it pretty much will eventually determine the value you create. Some data
And the
might
credits
rubbish.
that you get charged for.
Well, you say that, right? At the end of the day,
it's proportional. It's relative.
but to be fair, I know I understand completely. So it's like, for example, right? Most people like find this really confusing, right? Your different warehouses will process data in a different latency or different time frame. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which warehouse you use. The amount of credits you consume is going to be the same on average, right? So therefore, it's all about timing your processing of all your data. It's about how quickly your business requires it. And that's where there's a lot of business capabilities that need to be delivered. Like if you don't understand the business SLOs to make those decisions, then you can make the right choices regarding your data stack.
One other point, schema evolution, you mentioned a little bit about it, saying the source systems change constantly, right? And especially with this variety and volume and the scale and this thing, it becomes more critical that we manage that. I think you said what should be the futuristic view. So I would say the futuristic view is you have AIML built in that you don't have to engineer for it.
I think, well, the only thing that'll be, I love that future, but I think the data vault is a way of insulating yourself from the change of the source systems, but yeah, it's only one.
I don't know if anyone has solved for it.
Probably not, but we're on it.
So that's an interesting.
Without the manual configuration.
So this is where something like Snowflake's variant field, right, really comes into play. Some of my customers have gone down the path of saying all data that's ingested, we always put that into a variant field. A variant field, for people that are not aware of this, right, is think of it as a semi-structured data set, right, which you use.
But there's a problem with that, though. If there's some of the key fields you're using that are being used to select the data that's in that variant, if it's in the variant, it doesn't work very well. So you have to have that balance because there's some things like the date, the
Yeah.
actual current or whatever transaction.
But you still have engineering work to pick up that additional column or the change column to put it in the right data set, right?
Correct.
From
but-
the variant.
No, but that's true. But the thing is, you can then decide when you want to do it. That's the key difference. Because if you have a specific structured data set right at the beginning, right, and something changes, and you want to bring that in, there's time and effort trying to align them, making sure the two processes are in sync for you to bring that in. But when you start leveraging like the variant field, you don't care when it arrives. It just arrives. And then you can choose when you can take that in, where that value is going to be. So I think it's based on the comparison of like the seesaw is what drives business value now to what drives business value later. You can still bring in all the data now, but as things evolve and you find that it's actually important to use a field which you never previously used, you can bring that quite easily.
It's giving you the ability to react quickly if you want to change it. So, Latika, yeah, enough calls. But I'm not going to charge 15 minutes now to the company.
Chris, when somebody asks a question, repeat it, please.
Yeah. So when the question's asked, let's repeat the question.
Okay. Yes.
Right here.
So I think one of the challenges I face in Snowflake is that we have a large team worldwide, and a lot of people come and go in the team. So from an administration point of view, you have objects at the account level in Snowflake, and a lot of other objects at the database level. Now we have an excellent tool called getDDL, which extracts the definitions of your various objects at the database level. And unfortunately, that's missing at the account level, like warehouses, storage integrations, users, roles, and even stages, though it's a database object, but like some encryption parameters and all that. Now the thing is, it's not very practical to always use query history to find out who created the object, when it was created, because again, the data is only retained for a year. And again, it's not viable to always follow up with support. Look, I want to obtain the DDL of this object created 2 or 3 years back. So does Snowflake plan to provide a tool to kind of help, the various administrators to kind of
Bring back Quest.
bring back,
That's what we need.
those definitions
Quest
back to
Toad
user
for
communities.
Oracle.
I mean, now that we have disaster recovery, right? Now that we
Look
have
at
disaster
pretty good
recovery,
Quest boys.
from one region to other, I mean, the objects will probably flow, but again, we don't have visibility on it,
So can we repeat the question?
only if I get a beer. If you get me a beer, I'll repeat the question. I can't talk without beer.
Yeah.
Because I'll repeat the question.
Okay.
My voice is gone now.
So, I mean, I think it's a joint between both of us, to be fair. So to answer your question, I'm going to simplify this, right? So
Someone's got to repeat the question that has a voice now. So Debbie, can you talk for us?
So,
I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to get myself a beer.
if I'm going to simplify it, right? So the question is, someone creates an object, you don't have the definition of the object, and you want to create the object at a later point in time, at the basic level. Is that correct?
just even know the definition, because sometimes, even when the object gets created, say, for example, to be a stage, right? If you're using encryption and all, Snowflake doesn't make that visible even in query history, it doesn't make it visible. Like if I do a describe stage, I don't see those attributes,
So I think the way I'm going to answer your question is to say, do you have a data ops strategy?
We do use a repo, for storing all our code when we create objects now, but some years back, it wasn't done. So it's like...
What do you want?
Heineken.
I'm good for now, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
No, I see it
I'm
going to
good.
be long conversation
I
on
think so.
features.
So, I'm going to make the most of it, don't worry. No, I think we're going through it right now. It's all right. So to be fair, right, to answer your question, if there wasn't a really good source control in terms of your objects which you initially had, pretty much there's two ways of doing it. Is back to your point, you have to reverse engineer all the objects that you have, or what you do is painstakingly take something and build it. Now, it depends on where you want to build things at the end of the day, because and it feels like from your point of view, it's that like, especially from database object perspective, right? Forget stages and stuff, but just your model. It seems like you took the bottom-up approach, right? Whereby engineers actually built the tables and then they use those
without
and
having
so on.
forward cards on it, so they actually inherit the person that did it.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think your RBAC model needs a bit of review.
Yeah.
And I think that the other thing that could be useful is understanding where Terraform fits in. We can use something like what's it, Sketch that does your deployment to know where your state is of the environment. So it's working out the balance. So Terraform could do some of the main objects, those bigger ones, the account level, global level, and then some of the other ones. And then you can use Sketch or something that can actually keep or all the other alternatives, or there's other ones out there, that you can actually use and give you your state of the actual objects that are within the accounts. Yeah. Possibly.
And that's one of the examples I was going to give, so well done, Chris.
And I'm no longer a data engineer anymore. So, yeah, I still remember it.
Rob.
Thank you.
Well, would I be cheating to ask you 2 questions?
Wait.
No, it's okay. That's allowed.
First one. Well, we have this modern data stack, but why are companies really struggling to move data? I used to work at a school back in 2005. We had the same sort of problems just with data. Same sort of problems talking about customer satisfaction, churn rate, availability, and so on. Even today, we have the same problems with most people.
I'll give you one for is that there a lot of people do.
Repeat the
Repeat the question. Just saying, right, I can now because I've got beer. Earlier I couldn't. So you're saying is why does it take companies so long to ingest the data to get the value out of it?
No, it's not that. Why do companies still struggle?
Well, still struggle.
Okay, why are we having the same problems we had 15 years ago?
Yeah, it's because developers like developing. So they want to build their own framework like Eddie.
I think it's a maturity. In general, the business much faster. It's sad to say, but I'm from the IT originally, so it's the business much faster than us. So they push with a shadow IT, project. They push more and more for the self-service tools like, Tableau, Alteryx, those kind of tools, and which amazing, I think. But I think that now
and ThoughtSpot.
But I think that then you saw, the revolution of the Snowflake, and I think that Snowflake created the standard how SaaS company or SaaS product should be looked like. This is basically the best answer that I can provide. And now it's going all the way back to the integration layer. And I don't think that the revolution started now. I think that in the past 4 or 5 years, you saw many products and solutions that they did amazing job when it comes to self-service. Okay, but the challenge is that combine all of this together, not always providing the what you planned in the original when you just started this project. So
you have 2 questions.
So between the sorry.
I have a slightly different take on this. So one of the reasons I think is unstructured data has been largely ignored in the last 15 years. Only in the last 5 years, unstructured data has taken center stage. And if you look at a lot of churn problems, a lot of churn signals are there in the unstructured data, not necessarily the metadata. There are a lot of customer success platforms that builds purely based on metadata, and their churn predictions are not that great. But now you can start analyzing actual human communication, you can extract their emotions, their sentiments, and so on and so forth. The churn prediction signals are getting better. So part of it is that infrastructure was not there for unstructured data, and they do exist now, and you could treat unstructured data more like structured data at this point.
I think it's also demand and awareness, coming back to your question, is what's changed is people's demand for data has increased, and their awareness of the fact that they can actually get access to data has increased. Whereas roll back 5, 10 years, you go, I want to find something out, it's like, well, I have no chance, so I'll just forget that and get on with something else. So it's our whole demand culture that we have anyway, and that's being rolled back into the business and awareness that you can get answers.
I mean,
do you think that's ever going to change then? Because like you were saying, IT is always behind the business. So is that always going to be a problem? Is that going to be a standard?
Well, I
Can you
think
repeat that question?
Yeah, repeat the question. So do we think it's ever
Repeat the statement.
Yeah, so do we think it's ever going to
Is
change?
that just the nature of the beast?
Yeah.
I think yeah, it depends when IT and the whole tech stack catches up with the demands of the business. But if you think about it, it's like data revolutions or any revolution, right? There'll be something that happens in a period of time that causes a whole shift. And we're at the moment, we're experiencing the effect of a whole shift of everybody going, you know, not only data being available by being centralized and put in Snowflake, etc., but then how do you then access it? So we're kind of going on this journey to get there, and probably only 10 to 15% of the companies on the planet are actually there or getting there. So we've got a long way to go.
I think we touched on a few times in
feeding that
BI.
beast of the business. It gets greedier, it gets hungrier. So you can never satisfy that hunger.
So I think the business
And the IT, they've been separate entities for a while. We've talked about, shadow IT and things. And I said data community is actually what it should be about, and it shouldn't be them and us. It's like you have a common goal that's linked to the company's objectives, which is what the CEO set to the shareholders, and if it's a large company, that's what you're all collectively working together as a data community. And transparency within the data community, so you all know what's going on, so you know why you're doing it, and what the benefit from it. Getting that additional data you're talking about, that additional metadata, making sure it's known it's there. Because if you don't know data's dark data, or the data doesn't exist, it can be just as bad as can actually have a worse impact than actually the data does there. So knowing data's there, having that data asset catalog or data attribution catalog to know it's available for you and it's quality checked and things like that, and allowing it for self-serve people, we will make a data world a better place. But until then.
But there is one thing though. I mean, back to the question. At the end of the day, most businesses are driving for better competitor advantages.
Yes.
Right. That's the biggest change we've seen. Right. A lot of companies that are going down the digital route. Right. They're putting in machine learning models. They're doing a lot of things to help with churn predictions and so on. Right. If you're not going to compete with that, then you're going to fall beside the wayside. So therefore, that's why there's so much more demand to have even like the smallest competitive advantage, because that will be your differentiator moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also the awareness of the ability to monetize data. Companies out there who've got huge amounts of customer data. The customer data that they've got worth more than the airline from their operational process. So you go, okay, how do we monetize this data and transition the way business runs?
And that's another competitive advantage, right? Because once you can do that, and that then a cost center becomes a revenue generating center as well. Yeah, totally.
So which question are we answering at the moment?
I think it was your first question. That was the first question.
Yeah, in fact, sorry, I said no, two questions. Can we do them on a postcard? You send them all in a postcard, we'll judge or something like that. Well, we got, okay.
So we've been talking a lot about cloud cost management, and I've heard the term FinOps quite a bit. We have a lot of titles, modern data stack, data engineer, data, etc. Who's ultimately responsible for responsible cloud spend?
So,
is it going to be a new function?
Everyone.
I will.
Everyone's responsible.
Who has to do that?
So,
new job.
you might have. I've already recorded the presentation, but it hasn't out yet, so you can check if I'm going to be telling the truth. It's at the Data Ops Summit. So, whose responsibility? You stole the point. It's everyone. But I think the whole data ops. Did I repeat the question, Debbie, or not? Yeah, I did. Good. Right. So it's like data ops DevOps was all about accelerating that, getting that product to market from a technology aspect. They weren't accountable for the cost. So FinOps and the community and collaboration is what that. So that still gets used within the FinOps. It's about that community and collaboration, but they're focused on getting your best bang for your buck, making sure that you're getting the right business value from it, and making sure people are accountable for it. So I've got many more slides on that one. It's out next month, I think. So I'll promote it.
Chris, you've got tyranny and oppression going up there on this.
Is that my tyranny, your oppression?
No, it's tyranny and oppression of large cloud bills.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is what the imperial cloud providers are doing to.
The person who's focusing on writing clean Python code, for example, how do they
So we need to have tagging of where that consumption is being run, and then that tagging needs to have a business unit or an owner of that one that needs an observatory to go and see it, and they can be accountable for the spend and shame them if they're doing bad stuff. Have a report that says worst offenders that comes out this week is this person that run a 6XL and just runs 60 grand up in a few minutes, maybe or so. Then they will never do it again. I know that.
Yeah.
So I have a question here. So I think there's a lot of consensus in the room that modern data stack, Marmite data stack, is an ecosystem of best-of-breed tools that come together and make magic happen, right? Yeah. But where does it
You've
stop?
been listening, haven't you?
Exactly. So where does it stop? I mean, you walk down the exhibition hall at the summit. You see governance tools and data ops tools, and I guess we'll see FinOps tools in some time. There's, access control. There's ETLT. There's where does it stop? And maybe take some examples if you can by industry, right? So you mentioned, where does it stop? Maybe for a manufacturer or for an airline.
The finance situation will create a lot of consolidation.
Yeah. And the VCs don't have any money left because they spent it all.
And less money in the industry, so I think it's healthy. This is why I think it's healthy. Yeah. Lauren.
Yeah,
repeat the question.
Repeat the question. When does it stop with all the tools, more tools,
and all the people, like you said before?
And all the people. Yeah, fire everybody. Well, I mean, here's the situation we've gotten in. So what got us here, right? Like venture capital financed companies are always going to.
No, this is a good phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's a good.
They're always going to.
No, I'm backed by VC.
Yeah. we're all very backed by it. No. Well, here's how this works, right? Like in the transportation world, like you could get planes on charter.
We
a
tried
while
with
ago.
Joe to get me.
Right, so you go from New York to LA, chartered private plane. And then we went to make Uber, which was black cars. And then Lyft, which was any car. And then we got to bird scooters, right? And it's smaller and smaller point A to point B problems is where a large amount of financing is always going to converge. And so, we started with, Snowflake. We've got an engine. We're going to separate storage, compute. And then, we've got Fivetran or, a bunch of Fivetran competitors. That's what's going to get it in. And then, we've got BI tools. We've always had BI around. But, your Tableau, your Looker, your ThoughtSpot, everything else. And when there's a huge amount of financing coming in, you're going to solve smaller and smaller problems. You're going to have the right to exist. Like, can you get the financing? Can you run a business? The right to play. Can you, compete in a marketplace? And the right to win. And each of those three are different, structured finance layers. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of funds are essentially insolvent, or going to be insolvent. They're going to sell at auction to the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs of the world, and then the smaller and smaller problems of tools are going to stop.
So it's market consolidation, which is what's needed.
It's market consolidation.
The innovation is fantastic, right? Let there be new founders, more VCs to fund these ideas. But my question, I guess, is, the name of Pepsi came up in one of the conversations, right? Where does Pepsi stop? Right? Pepsi's business is
it's competitive advantage. It's that competitive advantage. So it's how much money you have to spend to get the competitive advantage. The ones that got the more money, there's more up for grabs. They're the ones who are going to spend it. And you go back to what's needed for a modern data set. It's what's right for you at a point in time of your journey, based on your maturity. So, and also your budget, because you need to get a return on investment for whatever you spend. And if you're not getting the value, there's no point spending it, because all you're doing is you're blowing someone else's money, possibly some VC money that's given it, and not getting any value. And you're just playing business, not actually being business.
Last question.
Thank God.
Yes.
What about the audience there?
Yeah.
Oh, actually no, Jason, because I'm going to pick, because I can. Yeah, Jason.
Sorry, someone else can.
Oh, well, no, it's okay.
I was going to ask, who owns the data?
The question is, who owns the data?
Okay.
Well done for read the question, so I might do the answer.
So I'm going to answer that in a way. So if you look at the data mesh approach, right, the data is owned by the domain teams, right? They own it, they understand it, they manage it, they produce it, right? If you've got questions about it, you go to the domain teams. That's from a decentralized approach. Centralized approach, you have a central team. And then there's the bit in the middle where some people think they own it, but they don't really own it. And there's analytics, our analysts that will then curate more data of base data, and they will own that. But what's the source of truth is your question, right? And once you understand what the real data that you're looking at is, you can create as many data elements from it as you can, right? That doesn't mean it's aligned with the definition that that data entity was originally involved with. So back to your question, who owns data? It depends.
Oh, that's a very IT. That's a very IT answer, and we cannot leave you on that one. I'm gonna give it. You have to do it after drinks. We'll do that one after.
Chris, I want to add
Thank you so much.
Just a minute.
Lauren will have one as well, probably.
I think that I'm speaking a lot about that one, that with anything that we want to do with the data, actually we are doing it on the same data sets. Okay, so it's, we are working in fragmented mode in the organization, and we all wanted to have the one single source of the truth, but actually we are creating a lot of silos, and I think that what we want to see is that people working with different let's say missions, but doing it, since they are doing it on the same data set, so it means that you need to own it all. And I think that like Lauren mentioned about who own the cost and everything, everyone. You are analyst, you are data engineer, you need to own it, you need to think about the value that you bring for your company and the value that you are providing for the organization. So you need to think about all of those aspects. The same as the security, governance, and the value for the business.
I'm going to give you a short answer, data community. It's the community.
Amazing.